So, hi everyone. This is Ranmaya on his show E-Coffee with Experts. Today we have a very special guest, Mr. Jeremy Moser from USERP. He is the co-founder and CEO of USERP, a full-service link building and digital PR agency headquartered out of Denver, Colorado. And Jeremy is an exceptionally successful entrepreneur and leader, having spearheaded SEO campaigns for major brands like BigCommerce, Freshworks, Monday.com. And before we take it forward, Jeremy, I would like you to introduce yourself to our audience today, and then we shall take it forward from there.
Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ranmay. It's good to be here. And I'm Jeremy Moser, co-founder and CEO of USERP. We're around, I think, 45, 50 person agency at this point. And like you mentioned, focusing holistically on SEO strategy, link building, digital PR, serving venture-backed software and e-commerce companies. And, I'm originally from San Francisco, but it's kind of doing a little bit of a digital nomad thing. So bouncing around a few different places at the moment. And just doing lots of cool work in the content marketing and SEO spaces.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. So today we are going to speak at large about, high quality content, link building strategies that will help you generate more traffic to your website, right? And none other than Jeremy to talk us through in terms of what his thought process is around this, right? Before we move forward, Jeremy, just a quick one. Do you have any mentors or people you look up to? If you do, probably if you can throw some light as to who all are they?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So in the SEO space, at least, I think one mentor that probably everyone can kind of relate to is Brian Dean from Backlinko on a few different levels. So number one being like, obviously just bootstrapping and scaling a business like that was really kind of content driven is always interesting to at least myself and folks in the different SEO spaces where you can essentially just focus for years and years and years publishing really good content in one specific niche and find a really successful outcome. So he's really inspirational on that front. I know some folks may disagree with some of the content that he has or the style that he has, sort of like Neil Patel in that sense, where he's sort of, either people love him or people hate him, depending on who you're asking or chatting with. I think both are sort of inspirational in their own elements for different reasons. So those would be, some good ones off the top of my head from just the SEO level there. And then I think from a business standpoint too, anyone that's run a really successful agency that has scaled one really heavily. So I think folks, along the lines of Garrett Margut from Directive Consulting is really interesting. Jonathan Dane from Client Boost is also very interesting. Folks that are scaling kind of large agencies and entities there. It's a completely different business model than SaaS and content as a whole. And so seeing folks that have been really successful in that have really good, practical, actionable advice are definitely folks that I look up to in this space.
Great. Good. No, we have some common names there in terms of whom I follow as well. Great. And since you spoke about SEO, what are the key considerations that you take into account while doing a website audit for, let's say, a prospect or a foot in the door offer that you're making for a prospect whom you're approaching? So how do you go about doing an SEO audit for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I always really like to start with a technical foundation. The technical foundation is really just key. Like if you don't have good usability, site structure, site speed, a bunch of broken pages or something like that, just the content and links that you're producing and earning are just not going to have the same impact across the board, right? If you're driving folks to slow pages, they're going to bounce, they're going to churn pretty quickly. If you're building links and again, you're changing up your page structure, your URLs all the time, you're going to have a bunch of dead links, you're not redirecting properly. There's all these sort of like minute details that add up over time from a technical standpoint that you really want to address. So where we always like to start is really just getting a baseline of like plug your site into something like PageSpeed Insights or GTmetrix. Both of those are free tools. You can get a quick idea of like site speed, broken pages, all of these sorts of things just to give you a little baseline there. And then you can also use tools like Screaming Frog is a good one. SEMrush has actually improved a lot of their technical analysis lately. So I'm becoming a big fan of that for doing just site-wide technical audits, fixing any errors, et cetera. So doing this monthly or even more frequently, really dependent on how big your site is. If you're like a brand new startup and you're just kind of getting off the ground, you might not have that much content or might even not even have that many pages on sites. I think technical becomes less of an issue. There's obviously the baseline stuff that you want to make sure you're doing, making sure pages are indexed, site maps, all these kind of things are really key. But beyond that, if you're a smaller site, there's probably not all that much from a technical standpoint that you can really leverage or pull upon. But obviously, make sure you got a good foundation there. And then if you are a larger site, make sure you're doing this pretty often because you're probably going to have a lot of new pages monthly. Things are going to shift around. Maybe you're doing a migration. Like there's all these sorts of things that come up when you become a larger site. So doing stuff on a more regular basis from a technical standpoint is definitely something I'd recommend.
Great, great. Talking about recommendations, you've been there for quite some time now. What are some of the common SEO mistakes that startups make, and probably you would red flag it in terms of not taking that route.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for smaller startups, especially, really the one of the biggest mistakes I see is publishing content without like an actual strategy in place. So most people will just have this idea that that's kind of been like, touted or spreaded in SEO spaces that you need to just publish mass amounts of content immediately, get a ton of stuff on your site, get a million articles up on any sort of closely related topic to your business as a whole. But what we find there is that you're really just creating more work for yourself down the line of like now you have hundreds and hundreds of articles that are probably not interlinked at all, not interconnected. There's no real page structure built out there of like different, core sectors of content. There's no clusters built out. You just have like a whole blog list of random topics that are not really interrelated. And so that means that you're going to have to refresh all those pieces. Probably 50 to 60% are not even going to rank well for anything realistically. So you have what's referred to as like, rotting or dead content in a sense to where none of that's really helping you in the long term. So I think if you're a startup, especially a smaller one, or maybe you're kind of in that mid tier and you're trying to get off the ground, trying to put some fuel on the fire, I think putting together a bigger strategy here in place is really key of just like, what sort of audience are you creating content for? What sort of customer profiles do you have? And maybe that's multiple. And then how do you formulate a strategy that really connects those topics into your product or into some sort of service, whatever it is that you're selling there, right? You want your content to at least have some sort of product-led, service-led standpoint to at some point in the funnel, you're reaching customers, whether it's top of the funnel informational, whether it's bottom of the funnel and they're ready to buy. You want content that shows up in those right places so that when they do go to buy, you're top of mind. They've already gotten familiar with your brand. So I think really taking the time to formulate a strategy before you just go all out on content creation is really key to make sure that you're not creating this massive backlog of kind of dead content or work that you have to do later down the line. You're really just nailing it from the start and you're really giving yourself a good foundation.
Right. So taking one step at a time and also evaluating your target audience and see where are they, what sort of message are you sending out, whether it's getting delivered the right way or not. So I completely relate to it. So backlinks also play a very important role. I mean, we all are aware about it. All the time we speak about, backlink generation, white hat, black hat. What are the important factors you consider while evaluating a backlink?
Yeah, absolutely. So we tend to look at a few different things across the board. We like to look at sort of domain level metrics as a whole as like a good leading indicator. So anything around like a DR, authority score, DA, whatever it is, they're all pretty much the same. They have their little differences in there, but essentially the same goal there of just giving you at least some sort of baseline score of how authoritative, how good this domain is. Again, that's one to take as like a leading indicator of not something you should look at as like, just the hard, fast only metric to look at there. If you're just looking at DR in a silo, it tends to not be super accurate. So look at it as like a good leading indicator there. If it's higher and it's, gives you a good baseline there, generally speaking, it's a pretty good site. There are exceptions, obviously. So you want to look at things around like what kind of traffic they're getting. Where is that traffic coming from? Are they getting organic and direct traffic? Are they getting branded search traffic? We like to look at a few different traffic metrics there to see not only are they performing good from like a keyword standpoint, but are they actually driving branded search? Like, is this a real company, a real brand that's getting, mentions? So if it's like HubSpot, for example, if you just look at their traffic profile, a ton of people are just going to search in Google HubSpot, right, every single month. So it's a good indication that this is a strong, powerful brand that people know, they resonate with, they're searching out it actively. It's another good core metric to understand if it's a real company. And then we also like to look at a few things beyond those core metrics, like obviously relevancy. If the relevancy of a site is good in terms of like a niche-wide relevancy, that's great. If the topic is relevant to you in some sort of way, awesome, even better. And then we like to see links be contextual there. So not any sort of like open submission sites or directories or business listings. Those are good from like a citational standpoint of like building a foundation of just like normalized links that you might get in. But they're not necessarily the links that we're talking about from like an authority or like link equity standpoint of let's get direct links back to specific pages on our site that we want to rank higher. Those are ones you want to be contextually mentioned within an article. So that's going to be, if you're an HR tool, you want to be mentioned in a piece about like the best HR tools or HR strategies, whatever it is. There's a bunch of different variations there that you can play with. But those would be sort of the core functions we look at from a good quality link standpoint. And then obviously like the visual test, right, of clicking on the site. Is it like a content farm? Does it have just like a bunch of random pieces that are not interrelated? Usually a good sign that it's just like a random site that's meant to just publish guest posts versus an actual brand. And so what we're looking for there long-term is really good large companies to link back to you from their own resource sections of a site is really kind of what we consider like a top tier backlink.
Mm-hmm. Great. We all talk about, ethical link building practices. What are some of those that, you or your team practice on a daily basis? What are your go-to areas when it comes to ethical link building?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the best way to go about it is really just thinking of it from a value exchange standpoint of essentially not, obviously you don't want to be gaming the system of like using PBNs or spinning up your own PBNs to where your goal there is not really adding value to anyone besides yourself of like, we're just going to create this PBN and then link to ourselves a million times and propagate rankings there. Stuff doesn't work super well anyways at the moment, just based on the last many years of updates. That stuff is just kind of a wasted time at this point. Especially if you're playing a longer term game. I think when you're going from an ethical standpoint, really your goal there is how do I add value to the readers of a given piece? And so that means creating more unique content on your own end, building longer term relationships with other publishers where you can add value back. Like, hey, maybe they source you for a quote in that article. Okay, now go give them some sort of value where you're publishing and promoting that. You're sharing that on socials or your newsletter. You're giving some sort of value in exchange there to where it makes some sense for them to link to you, maybe give you a quote, anything like that. So I think when you take it from an angle of like, how do I add value to that given site or the given readers, you tend to get to more ethical practices there where you can build links at scale from just better companies overall. So I think it's really a win-win for both sides.
Right. Building relationships is something that, you spoke is very important when it comes to, link building. So, in terms of link building, anchor text obviously becomes a very critical parameter. So how do you, optimize your anchor text to improve your link building and SEO efforts? A lot of SEO folks I've seen in the industry just, kind of stuff in the money keyword there. But, I know it doesn't work, but yeah, what is your version of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to like to do whatever is most natural in that sense of, if you think back to like the idea of link building and what it should be, you really don't have and shouldn't have any control over what that anchor text is. So if you're working on links and you're doing something where maybe you're suggesting someone to add a link somewhere, doing anything like that, not trying to anchor text stuff of like you mentioned, like if your keyword is whatever, best credit cards, you shouldn't be trying to get a million links per month that all say best credit cards. It's usually just a pattern that's creating in the eyes of Google of like, it's probably not natural that someone that every single piece is listing, a link back to you with the same exact anchor text. So again, you're creating like unnecessary patterns there. It's not super natural. Like no writer is just kind of stuffing random anchor text keywords in there. So you want to think about it really from the writing standpoint of like, when you're reading an article or you're pitching to an existing piece that's already out there, just read through the article and see like, what is the context of the topic that they're discussing? How does your article fit within that? Maybe it's more of a branded mention there in that case, or maybe it's more of something that's a little longer tail than the exact keyword string. I think as long as the URL or the anchor text within the URL there describes what someone would be clicking back to is really the key part there. And generally, it's going to be related in somewhat to the core keyword that you're targeting. But again, it's not always going to be an exact match. And if you are just creating a bunch of exact match ones at scale, you tend to run into issues there of creating patterns. So I think just seeing what are the variations of keywords for this page that I'm ranking for currently, there's probably dozens, if not hundreds, depending on the topic that you're ranking for. And so you can pick and choose from there and see what's most natural, what makes most sense within the context of that page or topic or sentence, and then kind of go from there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And according to you, how does a successful outreach program that brings in quality, backlinks look like? How do you go about creating those, or planning or strategizing those outreach programs?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll depend a little bit on sort of the size of the site that we're working with. So if it's like a larger brand, you obviously have a competitive advantage there in the sense that folks are probably naturally mentioning your brand in a bunch of different pieces, articles, whatever. Even if they're not linking back to you, that's still really a big opportunity for you to claim those unclaimed mentions, right? So if you're a large brand, you just have, it's the rich get richer, unfortunately, in SEO too, where if you're a big brand, things are a lot easier for you. But the catch 22 is that you need all those links, that effort, et cetera, to get to be a big brand in the first place. So it's a little bit of a difficult situation. But if you're a larger brand, for sure, there's a lot of untapped opportunities out there where campaigns are a little easier and a little more direct of like, hey, you mentioned me in this article here. You guys didn't link to this specific page that you were referencing. Like, can you guys add a link here? Be happy to share this around, et cetera. Campaigns like that tend to be really easy. You tend to see really high conversion rates depending on the given brand or space. Whereas if you're a smaller brand, you tend to have an uphill battle of like sending outreach emails. Nobody's ever heard of you. They don't want to link back to you. They think you're a very small site that you have no value to provide to them. So you tend to have to think a little outside of the box in the early stages. And that's where I like to focus on creating some sort of unique, valuable content, like whether it's a study or statistics pages or like a resource or template library, something that is giving value essentially to the site that you're reaching out to, so that you're not just reaching out cold and saying, hey, I have this random article that you've never heard of and it's not super valuable. Please link to me. It's just generally going to get you a super low conversion rate.
Right, sharing some information, putting in some valuable data insights there, and then probably, requesting an exchange of that what you've shared or something like that. Okay, get it. And what about, manual link building versus automated? We are all talking about automation. We'll talk about ChatGPT maybe sometime down the line. But what about when it comes to link building? What about manual versus automated? What is your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an interesting subject. So automated link building, or like if we're talking too about, just naturally occurring links, is again falls into that like catch 22 of like, getting natural links just by happenstance. You have to be a large brand and you have to rank for big keywords there that are usually really competitive. But the catch 22 is that you have to get a lot of links to rank for those pages that are super competitive and high volume traffic, et cetera. So you're sort of in that rock and hard place of like, you need a lot of links to rank, but you may not have them. So you don't pick up any natural links because of it. So automated link building when you're kind of a smaller brand is much more difficult. And also even, we've seen a couple studies. I can't remember who conducted this. I think it was either Brian Dean or Ahrefs, I want to say. But they found that essentially, I want to say 95 to 97% or something of articles online have zero backlinks. So it gives you an idea that like, if you just publish content and you expect people to share it, it's just not going to happen naturally. You really need to put some fuel on the fire there. And even big brands like NerdWallet still do manual link building. So as a simple analysis of their own backlink profile shows you things like quote-based links, syndications, all these other things that are signs of manual link building that were, they're running campaigns, they're putting an effort there. So even, the biggest finance brand in the world that ranks for pretty much everything under the sun is still doing manual link building there. Gives you an idea of the importance as well as just the need to run campaigns that have a little more detail there. I think you can do some automated stuff, but generally speaking, the more time, the more effort you put into a campaign directly around links, the better ones you're going to get and the higher conversion rate you're going to see.
Mm-hmm. Nice, great. So let me give you a scenario. Let's say you're working on a website, with low DR and a huge link gap, right? What will be your link building strategy around it? Let's say volume versus quality. What is gonna be your way of cracking that piece?
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the trickiest spots to be in is when, like I mentioned, the rich get richer in that sense of when you have a bigger competitor, they just get more links naturally, more people want to collaborate with them. You're facing an uphill battle there. And I think the biggest key is not necessarily even one or the other. It's sort of a mix of both. And so you really do need some mix between quality and quantity. Like if you're getting 2 great links per month, it might not be enough to really move the needle. If we're talking about, let's say you're a small competitor in the design space, you're trying to go up against Canva, like getting 2 links per month is just not going to move the needle, right? They're getting 50, 100, 1,000 plus links per month from pretty good quality sources. So you're really facing a dilemma there. And I think the biggest key is really honing in, first of all, on your topical authority. So finding a a specific sector within your niche of where you can become the topic expert. You can get really niche down in that one space, and then you can expand and go broader once you have a bit of authority coming in there. That allows you to get rankings relatively quickly in comparison. If you're going for like really broad terms as a whole, you can start to pick up a few natural links per month, and then you actually have some sort of content and leverage and promotional leverage there to where you can kind of, work relationships, you can get more links placed. And then I think a really key part there is focusing a little more on how do I create unique data sets or template libraries, all these sort of things so that you can see success in outreach. So like I mentioned, if you're a low DR, most sites just don't want to collaborate with you. You're just not going to have any leverage there in that from that standpoint. So I think try to create some really unique stuff. It's what we did for our own company. So we created a few different pages around unique studies, data sets, hundreds and hundreds of high DR links coming back to us from those single pages alone. And that was without any sort of leverage on, like, we didn't have a high DR at that point, but now we do because of it. So there's a few different kind of tactics you can get around with that. But I think really focusing from a quality content standpoint and then tying that back to your outreach instead of just, publishing another generic piece and expecting people to want to link back to it.
Right. Being the subject matter expert on, picking at certain topics and then gaining popularity in that particular segment rather than going after the broader term or industry per se. Right. And a quick one, guest post versus niche edits. How do you go about it?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I'm a big fan of both. It really just depends on sort of the strategies at play there in the given site. So we'd like to do a little bit of a mix depending on who we're working with. We usually see that things like niche edits can be really good for specific use cases of, like, if your space already has a good amount of topics created around it. So taking that example earlier of, like, let's say you're an HR tool or something like that, like an HR software platform. If you just search a bunch of variations around like HR tools, HR management, tools for employers, employees, all these sort of things, there's like a million variations of that, right? Where folks are writing listicles or articles just in general, where they're talking about different tools, et cetera. So your opportunities there from a niche editor link insertion standpoint are just massive, right? You're looking at articles that have existing traffic, they have existing links. Those ones are really valuable for quick wins of, like, even if your site is new and you don't have much traffic, if you're able to get listed on a tool or a piece that says, here's the 10 best HR tools, and you're getting listed number 3 on there or whatever it is, that's a big opportunity for you to drive some direct referral traffic, get some quick wins, conversions, and also some authority. So I think niche edits from those standpoints can be really huge wins. And then guest posts are good for longer term too, of, like, if you're, getting mentioned in an article that some writer is writing on a given site, that's usually going to be fresh content. It's going to be hopefully related to, obviously, the link that you're trying to get and the topic in general. So you might capture some new readers there. It also has the chance to rank long term on that given site. So we like to do a blend, and I think both can really, really drive some big impacts.
Right. So, since we did speak about, AI generated content, what are your thoughts, especially, going around what we're listening to or looking at in today's world in terms of AI generated content? What are your thoughts on the long-term feasibility of the same now that, Brad is also launched, to compete against ChatGPT? What is your take on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're seeing a lot of, what we saw at the start, at least with AI generated content, was that Google was pretty against it. First and foremost, they were kind of saying, don't publish any AI content. You're going to get penalized. Like, we don't accept any AI content. They've recently obviously changed their stance. They're kind of, obviously developing their own competitor there. So this is a broader trend of, like, I'd not really recommend listening to Google whatsoever on any advice they give about SEO. They're trying to, they made it pretty clear that they don't really like SEOs as a whole who try to set up stuff for the algorithm on purpose. So definitely I wouldn't take any advice directly from them. I'd take, a lot of what they're saying with a grain of salt. But in terms of AI as a whole, we're already seeing sites like Bankrate, CNET, a bunch of other massive ones are ranking AI produced articles already. So if you do a search operator string for, site bankrate.com and then article produced by AI, I forget what the exact string is that they use, you can see that they've got hundreds of articles already that are ranking and published that were generated by AI and then, like, reviewed by subject matter experts. So it gives you an idea that this is probably going to be a pretty popular thing in the future. Those articles already ranking for competitive terms. I think I can't remember who did this, but someone plugged it into Ahrefs and looked at like the total traffic value that it gets, and it was somewhere around like 180,000 plus per year worth of traffic value that they're getting from those articles, which are all AI generated. So it's for sure going to be something that we'll see increasing on the SERPs unless Google changes their stance on it at some point or whatever becomes of it. But yeah, the AI landscape's interesting. I think we're going to see more of it. I think we'll have to adapt a little bit. I think the good news is that most of AI-driven content will be based around more top-level stuff of like informational, very broad categories, keywords as a whole. If you're in a space that's more B2B, your product is more complex, the odds that AI is going to replace like someone with hands-on experience that's never written about this before, et cetera, it's just not going to happen, right? AI is pulling from existing stuff out there. So if you learn new things in your industry, new ideas, new things that work, new experiments, all this stuff that's never been sort of documented and written before in mass, AI just doesn't have anything to pull from there. So there's different kind of scenarios where it's good to have some AI content at some level where super basic keywords can be answered really quickly. But more technical stuff where like people are actually making buying decisions, it's hard for me to believe that someone will immediately take just a baseline like sort of chat bot style thing at face value of like, what chair should I buy? And then just immediately buying whatever the AI recommends versus doing a little more in-depth research.
True. Very true. So when it comes to AI, very valid point mentioned. It's already going to pull, plug in and, do the algorithm in terms of what is already available there in the internet. If you're looking for some specific, something that is new to the world, so then there is no information, or at least no valid information, which can be pulled out from and shown to the audiences. So yeah, and that is where we need humans, putting in their brains and the hands to create that sort of a content, that sort of an engaging content to get this going for that particular brand. Yeah. So since we spoke about keywords, at USERP, how do you go about conducting keyword research, for let's say more effective link building campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. For link building campaigns and keyword research, what we're really looking at here is a blend between specificity and volume. And so when you go too broad and you go too high volume and you make that really your only focus, you lose a lot of the unique leverage that you have as a given brand with you want to be obviously within a certain niche, right? And so if you're going super broad of like just SEO as a whole, for our example, if we wanted to create some sort of, we wanted to get a lot of links from SEO publishers in a given space. If we just create a piece around like, here's an SEO best practice guide, it's like that's been done, thousands of times over and over. What we want to look at there is a blend between something that still has enough search volume to be relevant and that people are interested in, but has the specificity to where someone probably has not created a study around it or some sort of unique piece of content, so that you have the upper hand when you're doing outreach of like, you're actually being truthful when you say in your outreach email, hey, this is a unique piece of content, your readers will find it helpful, et cetera. You're not just going to be sending them, a basic SEO guide that they've read 1,000 times. And so finding that blend and mix between those two is really key. So if you just use really any keyword tool there, plug in sort of your base level topics there and do like the matching terms section there. Filter that by like the volume, keyword difficulty. Don't be afraid to target lower volume keywords too. If you see something at 10, 20 searches per month is probably much higher than that. There's been a couple studies around like keyword volume within SEO tools is just not super accurate. We've seen the same for ourselves and our clients where like a given keyword search might say 10 to 50 searches per month. In actuality, if we get them ranking first, they're generating 500 to 1,000 plus for that one page. So there's a lot of opportunity that's uncovered there that people just won't write articles around because the search volume says it's super low. So from a keyword research standpoint, that's where I'd recommend starting. You can uncover a lot of ideas, and then also just think about sort of new developments in your space, right? A lot of those keywords aren't going to show up in keyword tools because they're brand new. They're new topics, subject areas that people are covering, more interested in. I think something like 8.5 billion searches happen a day on Google, and 20% I think they said are new on a daily basis. So it gives you an idea of like how many queries there are that are happening at a given time. So always just try to think too of like new stuff in your space. What's the innovation? What's the current trend? And try to get ahead of those, because if you can solidify rankings for some of those keywords pretty early on, your chances of winning down the road in that space are really huge.
Easy wins with even low volume keywords is what we also suggest, rather than going gang ho in terms of the high volume keywords and high domain authority sites already ranking for them in the top 10. And if you or your client is not there in terms of the domain authority, it's all that more difficult for you to kind of crack that first page. So easy wins, low volume keywords is the mantra. Is that's what you're suggesting as well. Great. And last piece, Jeremy. Any advice that you'd like to give our audience they can use and gain benefits from today? It can be about SEO, link building, your expertise. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think really just finding your niche that you fall within is really key, from really just an SEO and link building standpoint of how do you add sort of unique value in your content? How do you add unique value to the industry as a whole is really key. We've even been able to see smaller brands start to rank for more competitive stuff because they have some sort of unique value to add there from a topical standpoint of like maybe they have new subject matter experts that are testing things. Maybe other folks in that space haven't done that before. So just think about like what sort of content you can create that adds unique value, and then tie that into a proper and solid distribution plan of just thinking about how these pieces work together, right? Of like the build it and they will come era of creating content and just expecting people to promote it is not here anymore. There's just too many competitors, too many people out there that are doing the same thing, have similar content. So building that into your strategy of, okay, we need to take the time to reverse engineer and say, here's our audience, here's what they're searching for. Let's create dense networks of content around this. And then let's be very active in how we promote that and distribute that. And you tend to see just far better results than kind of just throwing spaghetti at the wall with your content and hoping that it sticks. So that's what I'd recommend for sure for the long term. You're also creating yourself less work in the end. And if you have less content on your site that's more specific, you can really hone in on that niche, refine it over time, make it even better, and you'll tend to rank there long term.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy. I'm sure our audiences must have got the message that you want to put across the table. And before we let you go, we would like to play a rapid fire. Hope you're game for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. When was your last vacation?
Oh man, my last vacation. Yeah, that's a good question. Well, my wife and I moved to Hawaii like for 6 months or so. So I count, it's not necessarily a vacation in the sense that I was still obviously working all the time, but it's hard to complain whether you're there. So I'll count that as a vacation.
It is. People go there taking time out of the busy schedule and you're already there 365 days a year. Okay. And, what did you do with your first salary, if you remember that at all?
Yeah, my first salary, I want to say probably like 35 or 40K a year, I think, and doing stuff in like the content marketing space is like my first official salary, but making, did stuff like hourly before that and all.
Mm-hmm. And what did you do with that?
With the salary in terms of like investing or anything like that?
Yeah, where did you spend it?
Yeah. So I'm a pretty big saver. I'm pretty frugal. So a lot of what I do is just like, is super boring, right? Like I try not to spend a lot of money. I just try to plug it away in index funds and take the safe route.
Okay. So the last one I had, I would not name the person, obviously, quite a name in the digital space. She said she paid up rent, and that was quite honest on her part. All right. And favorite sport, if any?
Yeah, I'd say basketball for sure. Played it growing up and like watching it as well.
Okay. Nice. Great, Jeremy. It was lovely having you here with us. It was a pleasure. And thank you so much for your time. I'm sure our audiences would have benefited out a lot in terms of what you have shared, the valuable insights. And we'll try and get hold of you for another episode sometime soon. And it has been a real pleasure hosting you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.